Well, welcome to today's training. I'm Angie Baker. I'm the Technology Training and Outreach Manager for MyBor. Welcome to Introduction to RPR. So as we get started here, we may have a variety of different people who are joining in today. So just want to get everybody kind of started at the same point. If you want to follow along today, you're absolutely welcome to. You can go ahead and log into your MyBor services just like you normally would. And on your dashboard, where you normally would probably click to go to the BLC here in the top left tile, today we're going to be using this one down here that says RPR. Now, there is a setup piece to RPR that you would need to go through before you can get in and fully utilize the system. So just be aware of that. Everyone gets this for free, and I'll kind of go through what RPR is and why we might want to use it. But if you've never been in RPR before, you're going to get prompted for a password that you probably don't know. So on the screen that would prompt and say, put in your password here, there's a forgot password link or a reset password. So you would just need to click that if you don't get directly into RPR. But you can take care of that in a minute. Let's just get started kind of with some ground rules of what is RPR and why should I use it. So this is from RPR's blog page that's full of all kinds of additional resources that you have access to. And this just goes into what is RPR. So it is an additional database that's available only to realtors. So you can see there's 3 bullet points here. It's 100% owned by realtors through your membership with the National Association of Realtors. So it was created by NAR and is only accessible to its members. It's exclusively for realtors, of course, so you have to be a realtor to be a member of NAR and vice versa. So there's no third party or public access. What this means kind of in the context of how you're used to using your different systems is when you use Matrix, the BLC platform, and you create, let's say, a search for your buyer clients and you're sending them listing information, the way they gain access to that listing information is through that client portal, which is sort of the consumer facing part of Matrix. And so RPR, what it's saying here by exclusively for realtors, is simply that there's no consumer facing side of this. If you want to provide information to your clients from within RPR, then we'll generate a report and provide a one-time report for your clients, but it's not an interactive, back and forth between you and your clients. This is simply a research tool that you have access to as a realtor, but nobody else can gain access to it, including any real estate licensees in the state that are not members of NAR, IAR, MyBor. The last bullet point here says it's a no-cost member benefit. There's always a cost to everything. So it's included, the cost of the benefit is included in the dues that you already pay. So this is not what some tools I refer to as like a freemium, where you get a base level of service, but then you have to upgrade, you have to pay to upgrade. That's not RPR. So RPR, anything that they release as a feature is automatically available to you. It's kind of you get everything. It's all the good stuff. So it's just sort of the groundwork of what RPR is. And then there's a couple of different ways that you can actually get in RPR, which I'll show you. But you might want to jot down or go to and bookmark this page here. It's simply blog.narrpr.com. Okay, blog.narrpr.com. That's going to be the site that you have access to for articles, industry information, e-learning options. I just said e-learning because that's what my kids are doing right now. But online learning resources for you. They have tons of webinars, tons of pre-recorded videos available to you that you can use to kind of take the next step. I'm going to get you introduced to RPR, walk you through the main forms of functionality. But if you want to kind of get additional resources, additional information following this class, then this is going to be the site for you to visit. Okay, blog.narrpr.com. And you can leap through it from the main page too, but sometimes it's nice to just be able to go directly to the page you want. All right, so I'm just going to close that out. This is the main page of RPR. So there's a couple of different ways that you can get here. From your MyBoard dashboard, of course, you can click on that RPR logo that's in this tile on your dashboard, and that will launch just this main search page. You also at the top of the screen have the narrpr.com website that if you just wanted to type it in, if that's easier for you, that's fine too. The nice thing about going through the MyBoard dashboard is it'll recognize you. Once you initially create that account and get logged in, it will recognize who you are, and you don't have to remember those login credentials because it'll just leap you through that dashboard page, and you don't have to do any additional logins. It's that single sign-on capability. Okay, so here you'll see that this page looks a lot like many of the other property search websites that you may have visited. The exception, what makes this a bit different, is the ability to search not just for sale or for lease properties, but you'll see here the ability to search all properties, meaning it's a tax level database. So if a property is not on the market, never been on the market, or it's recently sold, anything like that, you're going to be able to still find that property. Similar to in Matrix, if you've seen me demonstrate the public record search in Matrix, same thing here. It's a tax level search. So regardless of the status or the availability of that property for purchase, it's going to show up. So any address, you can put any address in here. The other nice thing here with this all properties is that you can search for property outside of our coverage area. So if you're someone who maybe is on the border of our MyBoard or BLC coverage area, and maybe you're in that cross MLS period where you may have, let's say, Lafayette's probably a good example. If you're somebody that's operating kind of between Hamilton County and Lafayette, then you may have need to find out information about properties in multiple different MLSs. This is a NAR product, so you can actually search outside of our BLC coverage area. And so a lot of times, maybe it doesn't make sense for you to be a member of multiple MLSs because you primarily do your work in one, but you every once in a while may need information about a property outside of our coverage area. This is a good place to be able to go and look up that information. So I can type in this all properties search, an address, a city, a zip code. So it'll give you some prompts here if I wanted to search a property. So I'm going to use an example off-market property today. It's the same one I used in the Matrix CMA class a couple of days ago. So I'm just going to continue with that same property. I can look it up in here in this all properties, and it's currently off the market, but I can look up 11509 Ludlow Drive. Should start finding it here, Fishers, Indiana. Usually it'll prompt me, but not today. So I'm just going to click the little search icon over to the right, and it'll look up that property and bring me to this summary page of the property. Okay, so that's how I'm going to walk through it today, but I want to show you a couple of other things. I'm just going to use the back button and go back to that main search screen so I can show you a couple of other things here that you can do. I can look up neighborhood information. So neighborhoods, it's going to be a bit bigger than your subdivision level, but I can look up, I can look up a neighborhood name, a city, a zip code, a county, and get to a neighborhood level information. Neighborhoods typically is going to get you to like a zip code level. There's a school search in here. RPR uses the company called Niche, which some of our other resources use as well. And it's going to pull in some school activity as well. So I'll show you if you're looking for a specific school or you're looking for school information, the best way that I think to search for schools is actually by the city or by the school district. And then you could get down to the individual schools. But if you know anything about, especially IPS schools, Indianapolis public schools, some of them have fairly long names. They're named after a person and then maybe have a number tied to them. So sometimes finding an individual school name can be a little bit tricky. But if I were to look up Indianapolis public schools, it would give me a list of all schools within that district. and then I could pick and choose which schools I wanted to look at. So just a trick from what I've seen in the system. Sometimes it can be a little bit a little tricky to try to find an individual school within this search, just because of the way that our schools are named. And then lastly, you have a market activity search. So you can do some stats, some activity searches in here as well, but all of these different menu pieces, the for sale, neighborhood, schools, market activity, those are all going to be included in the reports that I walk you through as we go through this. So I'll just point those out as we're going through the system so you can see what those bits of information look like as we relate it to this one property that I'm going to use as our example. Sound good? That's where we're going today. I want to point out one other way that you can get in RPR to get started, and that's a way that I see a lot of people get started is from within Matrix. So a lot of times you're in Matrix anyway, and this is the same property I looked up in Matrix the other day as I started my search. I pulled up this property. This is actually in the tax record search, but I clicked to the last listing here. And regardless of whether you do a listing-based search or whether you do a tax search, when you're in the full display of the listing itself, there is a little RPR logo under the picture on every single listing that we've got in our system, going back 20 years worth of data. Every single property that you pull up that has some listing history attached to it, when you pull that up, it's going to have that little RPR logo. I call it the Skittles button. I think it looks like a handful of Skittles. If you like candy like me, then that makes sense to you. So anytime you see that little logo right there, you can click on it and it will open up to that same page that I just searched from the RPR home screen. So two different ways to get to the same information. It just depends on what's most convenient to you, where you happen to be working at that time, what's going to be the best way for you to get there. So since I had this property already pulled up in the BLC, I can just click the logo for RPR to get to it. Or if I had started on the dashboard and gone to RPR, then certainly I can look it up on the home screen. Either way is going to get me to the exact same page and give me the exact same tool set to walk through it. Cool? Okay. So from here, there's a ton of information that's packed into this RPR platform. They actually leverage information, data from over 350 different sources. So I don't know off the top of my head all 350 different ones, but I'll try to point out a few that they're pulling in as I go through. I'll kind of point through where those come from. So one of the very first ones that you'll see is at the top of this screen here, they've got this little RVM. So you might be familiar with other programs, other platforms that offer an estimate of value. There's a whole bunch out there in the world, in the real estate industry. And they've kind of gotten a bad rap because some of them use different sources of data than others, and some might be more reliable than others, and some are just flat out not good. So this is an estimate of data, or I'm sorry, an estimate of value that pulls directly from the BLC data set. So what that means is most third-party aggregated sites do not get a direct feed of the BLC data. And the reason for that is that they are third-party advertising platforms. So the relationship is just very, very different with those platforms. That we have licensing contracts in place that dictate exactly how they can receive our data, the amount of data that they get, whether they get on-market or off-market information, and how they can display and utilize that information. With RPR, since it is a realtors only tool and it's not for the purpose of advertising or building leads or anything like that, it's strictly a realtor tool for your research purposes. We do have a direct feed, so they get essentially our real-time information, both on market and off market and past information. So it's a different licensing relationship here, which means that these estimates of value are quite a bit more reliable. They're still not 100% because it's a computer generating through calculations of data without the human context, the market context that you guys bring to the table, but it's going to be far more reliable, far more accurate than some of those others that I know you all have concerns about. So let me just show you kind of where this comes from and how it works. So you can see the last time this RVM was updated was March 10th. So it's pretty timely information. You can also see through the system, you'll see these little blue circles with an I in them. Those always mean that there's some information sitting there that you can get an explanation on whatever it is that's on the screen. So if I put my mouse over that little I next to RVM, it tells you that this is called a Realtors valuation model. Out in the marketplace on other sites, you'll often see these referred to as automated valuation models, or AVMs. And sometimes I have seen from time to time where maybe I'm in a more rural area of our marketplace. There's not a whole lot of data for the system to be able to pull and accurately value a property. So it will change the label here to AVM if that's ever the case, where it just doesn't have enough comps to reliably make a good calculation. So just watch for that label change. If you ever see it something other than RVM, it means that you're in an area where there's not a lot of comps kind of available in the background. Okay, but otherwise, underneath where it tells me when that last update was made, you'll see a link that says view details. Now, I haven't clicked on this yet on this property, so this will be news to me too. But in this view details, it shows me any comps that it did pull. And this one actually has some pretty good ones. From time to time, I'll see one or two, or one that's a little bit older than what I would expect. So this one looks like it's got a decent amount of comps sitting here in the background. It's got 3 sold properties and 1 that expired. And you can see the information about those comps just in this little one-liner here that tells me, kind of where it is, how far away it is from the subject property, how long it sat on the market before it sold, and the sold date, sold price. All of those different metrics are in there. And these properties are the ones that it's using behind the scenes to run its algorithms and check to see what that estimated value could be. Now, I have a little bit of a leg up on this one because I used it in a CMA class a couple of days ago. And the valuation that I came up with in the CMA that I did in Matrix was pretty much what this is posted at. It was right around 355 to 360 is what we had written into that one. So this is maybe a little on the higher end side, but it's getting me in the same ballpark as what I was able to find by running a full-fledged CMA, doing adjustments, all of that stuff inside Matrix. So sometimes it's a great tool, even just to use as a gut check if you have another system that you prefer doing your CMAs in, or you're just not comfortable here yet. That can sometimes be helpful just to go, hey, just as another source of information, weighing in on the pricing that I'm looking for, this could be helpful. Okay, so that little RVM is going to give you some information. The other piece that I like to just compare it to is down here where it says RVM estimated range. This is the price per square footage range for all of those comps that it pulled into the valuation algorithm. It's showing me, okay, the price per square foot of each of those sold properties was between $335, $498 and $386.02. So that's the price per square footage range that it used in those comps. And then the RVM confidence rating down here is really pretty cool because this gives me a at a glance indicator of how does the system actually feel about the comps that it pulled in and how similar or dissimilar are they from my subject. So this really calculates based on 2 different things. The confidence rating will show up if there is a good bit of similar information available. So just like you as a listing agent, if you're running your comps and you're like, hey, I've got great comps to choose from for this property, or geez, I really have nothing that's similar when I'm doing this, that confidence score is kind of the same way that you feel. How good are the properties that it's pulling? The other thing that factors into this confidence rating is that for that RVM, that valuation, it's actually going to use several different methods of calculation in the various algorithms. This gets geek for just a second and then I'll back off. But it uses several different methods in calculation. It might use the price per square foot and run that through. It might use the average sale price and run that through. Just like you, when you are doing your valuations, you may use several different methods and kind of cross-reference them. This is doing the same thing. It's cross-referencing those different algorithms. And the closer those algorithms come in their math, the higher your star ratings on the screen are going to be. So it's really pretty cool. That star rating is kind of my go-to for deciding how comfortable I am with this number. If I've got a 4 or a 5, then I'm feeling pretty confident going forward. If it's 3 or less, I'm going to dig in here, get my hands dirty, and kind of verify every piece of information just so I can make sure that I'm on the right track. Okay. Funny story. I had somebody in a class one day that she came in and she said, I'm really interested to go through this class because I spent like 6 hours yesterday working on a CMA for this property that I'm just having a really hard time, finding decent comps, making sure that I'm comparing the right things and I'm weighing value on the right things. And so I'm interested to see what RPR does with that property. So I said, of course, you have a real life scenario you need to work through. You go through the class with that property. I'm going to use my sample property and just let me know how it turns out. And so as soon as we clicked the RPR button to go and look at her subject property, she sort of gasped loudly and said, this came within $100 of what I came up with yesterday in my 6 hours of doing analysis in a CMA. So sometimes you hit the jackpot and it's really, really accurate. And then I've had other classes where people are like, this is completely off. But typically that star rating is going to align with what you know to be true too. So take it with a grain of salt. It is a computer generating these numbers, but they can be very, very helpful to you. Okay, so moving on down from there, you've got the basic facts, bedrooms, bathroom count, all that comes from the public record, the tax record. So again, you can look at this little eye bubble and it'll tell you it's all coming from either listing information, if it's an on the market property, if it's for sale or for lease and it's been entered in the BLC, then it will use that. But for properties that are not currently active, it's going to pull from the tax record. All right, underneath that, you can see I have a street view here. So because this is an older sold record, this sold back in 2018. So since it's not within the last 6 months or so, it's going to use the Google Street View in place of the listing photos. So it only uses the listing photos on active listings and on very recently solds. Otherwise, I get this Google Street View, and it's a live Google Street View. So I can move it around. I can use the little arrows to walk to the front of the house, since it gave me a corner view, and kind of slide around so I can see what this property looks like. I have a love-hate relationship with Google Street View because sometimes it'll show me like this very lovely tree instead of the actual house. So it's nice to be able to kind of move it around and get your positioning where it's easy for you to see the property. Sometimes Google Street View is not allowed in a neighborhood. Some of the gated communities, or even sometimes in rural communities, they won't have Google Street View images available. So instead, you would see the overhead view like this. That's just the Google Maps view looking down on top of the property. So it just kind of depends on the location of the house that you're dealing with, what kind of view you're going to get. But since it's live embedded in here, I can manipulate it a little bit. I can only manipulate it for my on-screen viewing. When I go to create a report, it's going to revert back to whatever that static Google image is. So just something to be aware of. Okay. All right. So scrolling on down from there, you'll see sprinkled into this system lots of places to add notes. So I don't know about any of you guys, but I'm a note taker. I could show you all of these little sticky notes that I have laying across my desk that I'm constantly putting notes on. And they just sometimes sort of get covered up with other things and die after a while. And I'll pick one up and go, I have no idea what this meant. So if you're one of those note takers, you're always, writing in your notepad or leaving yourself sticky notes. This is a great system for you because, maybe you're online and talking with the client, have RPR open and you can add the notes in there, whatever they might say that you think I need to remember that. Or if you've written something down on a sticky note or on a notepad, you can transfer that information over here into the notes section so that you don't forget about it or misplace it or, life happens, right? So I can add a note in here, and then when I go to create some reports, I have the option to include those notes as part of my report or not. So I always say don't write anything down that you wouldn't want someone else to see if it's related to property. But sometimes, you know, it's just for your own notation, and other times it's something that you want to discuss with your client. So lots of opportunities. You'll see these note boxes several different places as we move through. You'll also see there's a button down here where I could upload a photo if I want to. So this, again, this photo would only be for the purposes of my report. If I upload a photo or add a note or change any of the information as I'm going through, it's only for my report. It only exists in my own login screen. So if I were to upload a photo here and let's see who's on the call, and Nicole, hello, were to open this exact same property, she would not see my note and she would not see any of my changes. So it's just within the confines of your own login. Nobody else is going to see your work. Okay, so I can add notes, I can add a photo here if I want to, and then you'll start seeing the facts about the property. So homeowner facts from the public records, and then a side-by-side here for home facts. Now, this home facts section is very reminiscent of a lot of your CMA programs that you might be used to, where you have the tax record information or past listing information, and then you have the ability to put in your own facts. If you know something that's either changed or that was not correctly input in the first place, you have the flexibility here to add your own information or make your own changes. Now, some of the changes that you can make will affect the valuation that was posted at the top, and some will not. So for example, if I were to change the lot size, well, it's not 0.39 acres, it's actually 0.42 acres. That is not going to change the valuation at the top. But if I were to change the number of bedrooms, and I think the number of bathrooms, and certainly the living area square footage, that is going to have an impact on my valuation at the top. And sometimes I don't like the way the math works in here. So just be aware of that, keep an eye on it, and make sure that it doesn't do, as I say, anything funky with your math. If you see funky math happening, you can always come down to the bottom and either clear or revert back to what it originally was, and kind of pull that out and maybe just make a note of that change that you would make. So again, it depends on your price range. It depends on you know, the property that you're looking at, but you'll just want to watch that math in there. So if you do make any changes down here, I'm just going to click save. That'll lock that change in, and it should, if I roll back up to the top, yeah, I still have the same number there, so it's not doing any valuation changes at this time based on that change that I made. But if I had changed the number of bedrooms, I would have a value change there. Now you can see at the bottom here that I saved that. If I wanted to clear it, I can still clear it and it would just go away. There's another section for notes. You'll see charts and graphs kind of sprinkled in throughout the system as well. And there's certainly a whole section of, you know, various charts, graphs. There's a whole section up here, a tab that we will walk through that's full of those charts. So I'm not going to spend too much time on them on this page because we'll go through it later. Interior details, exterior details, location details, including flood zone information, just kind of spelled out here, real easy to see. More section for notes, other details, and then there is this section down here for schools. Now, again, the schools information in RPR comes from Niche is their source, and you'll see elementary, middle school, high school in the school district. Different levels of information are going to pull in, again, depending on the location that you're in. We have better school data from some districts than from others. There's a couple of school districts kind of on the western side of our coverage area where the layers aren't available for whatever reason from that district. So some of them, depending on the location that you're working in, your links here are going to be more or less filled in. So just be aware of that. You could still go search for the schools, just like I showed you on that home screen search. But the level of automated population in your reports may differ depending on your location. If I want information say about Hoosier Road Elementary School, then you'll see that each of these schools is a link. So I could click on the link here, Hoosier Road Elementary School, and it takes me over into the school section, gives me contact information for that school. So, okay, I know we're talking about listings here, but this would be really, really helpful on the buyer side, right? So all the same information shows up if you're looking at an active listing and working with a buyer. Maybe they're preparing to make an offer on this property and they want all the information they can absolutely get from you. And so this is a piece of information that you can provide to them that would be very, very helpful. Gives them all this school data. So, you know, what grades does it serve? What's the phone number so they can call and schedule a tour of that school if they want to? And then ratings and various school information. So total enrollment number, student to teacher ratios. It even gives like the teachers in the first or second year of their teaching career. So I think that's really interesting. And of course, depending on the school that you choose, obviously I'm in an elementary school here, but if I chose the high school, then I'd have some graduation rates and some SAT and ACT scores. So, so really, really helpful information here. And then if I'm done looking at this, I can just click the back button in my upper left-hand corner. It doesn't break anything. It's not going to clear anything. I can just get right back into the listing page, this summary page of the property. So really easy to navigate back and forth. If I had continued clicking through, I can just hit my back button in the system until I get back to the point where I want to be able to view. Okay, so lots of school information there. I'm gonna scroll back up my screen for just a second so I can show you, not only is it gonna pull in the schools that are most likely to be assigned to that property, but it on the right-hand column here, it gives me a section of schools nearby. And this is going to include all schools based on location. So it's gonna show me any schools that are near this property, including if I go to the next 5, it's going to have certainly the public schools. I'm seeing all public schools here, but it would also show me any charter schools. Oh, there we go. There's a Montessori school. There's a charter school there. So any education providers are going to show up in this list. So charter schools, religious schools, there's a religious school, trade schools, all of them. Any education provider is going to show up in this list. So if you have a client who says, well, in the past, we've had our children at a Montessori school. Do you know if there's any of those near this property? You can go through here and see those that are going to be close by, provide them that information. Now, on any of the schools that are non-public schools, the various levels or pieces of information that are fed into that niche system may be different. I've seen some of them that are completely filled in, and others like the grading system may not be there. So just differences in the information that's reported to the Department of Education, which is where it all kind of flows from. Okay, so lots and lots of school information. Before I stop talking about school information, I want to point out one other thing over here in Matrix, because this is something that's brand new. We've recently done an integration between RPR and Matrix for that school data. So if the school information is filled out in the listing, this one just has the school district itself, but if it had the individual schools listed, they would also be links, just like Hamilton Southeastern here is a link. If I click on that link, then it would hop me over to the school results for that school district. And then there's all the schools contained within that district. If this property in Matrix had the individual schools listed out, each of them would be a link that would take me to that individual school report, just like I saw for Hoosier Road Elementary. You guys like that? Is that cool? Give me a thumbs up if you like that. Okay. If you don't like it, you can give me a thumbs down, I suppose. But we've just tried to make the chain of information a bit easier for you to get to, so you don't have to constantly be clicking through to find what it is you're looking for. Okay, moving on down the screen then past the school information, you've got legal description, another section for notes, tax information, more notes, and deed records. So lots and lots of detail about this property, all kind of compiled into one platform. And then if I scroll back up, the screen, you saw the schools nearby I showed you. There's some of those charts and graphs we'll look at on another screen. And then at the very top, there's a map that you can open up or make bigger or smaller, depending on if you want to look at the map in more detail. So that's everything on that summary page. I'm just going to walk across these tabs to show you some of the other information, but I'm actually going to go in reverse order just a little bit because I want to go to the very other end to neighborhood so that you can see some of the overarching information that's available within the property report. So if I go to neighborhood, let it load here. I've been talking for like 2 weeks straight, so I'm chugging some water today. I hope you guys will forgive me. So when I get to the neighborhood section, this gives me a really cool, very comprehensive report. And now this is to the zip code level. So you can see it says Fishers, Indiana 46037. I could change it to a different zip code if I wanted to, but you can see on the map over here the area of town that it's giving me. So the neighborhood report you can think of as more of a statistical report, which means that I need a bigger set of data than what I'm going to end up walking through on a comparative market analysis. So on a CMA, I want just the most similar properties as possible, just a very, very narrow set of data. On statistical reports, or in here it's called neighborhood reports, I want a bigger source of data so that I can see better trend lines. It just is a better picture of the trends in a market area, the more data that I have. So in this Fishers, Indiana 46037, it tells me the median estimated home value, change over the last month, and change over the last 12 months. So very, very stable marketplace that we're existing in right now, even though I know we all have a little anxiety and things are definitely changing in the short term. In general, we have a really, really stable history in our marketplace. So as I scroll on down here, it tells me, some of these charts and graphs of the median list price versus listing volume. Very, very stable. It's going to give me 3 years worth of information here. Listing volume gives me also some population details in the summary page. So in this zip code, what's the population of children look like? How about adults? This is just census-based data. So since this 2020 is a census year, this will get updated even better. Right now, it's based on 10 years ago census data and then just updated by transactional history. So this is going to show me some of that census-related data, population information, and then I have these tabs up at the top that talk about housing. Right, so the next one is housing, and that's going to give me, median list price, and it compares the zip code to the city, to the county, to the state, to the nation. So it gives me very high level comparisons. This is a really helpful one, especially if you've ever tried to do a BPO. I don't know if there's anybody on the call that ever does broker price opinions for lenders. One of the questions on those Fannie Mae BPOs is what's the percentage of ownership versus rent, and we get asked all the time, how do I figure that out? How do I find that out? Well, it's written right here into the RPR neighborhood reports, so that's a great source of that information. What's the ownership versus the rental in this zip code? So I can kind of scroll down through here, price ranges of homes, price per square footage of homes. So it gives me some of that overall information. Then the next tab over is going to look at people. You guys remember that song from Sesame Street, right? Who are the people in my neighborhood? That's kind of what this tab is going to show. Is again, it looks back at that census information and tells me about population, density, age, sex ratios, and then levels of education levels of population. So it tells me, what are the most dense levels of education in that grouping of people. Age group breakdowns, household income brackets, occupational categories. So it gives me a really cool overview of what does this area of town look like? Who is my audience? Who are my consumers in this area of town? Okay. The economy is the next one. So this is going to show me some unemployment information. It's also going to show me Come on, generate. There we go. Income levels, unemployment levels, labor force numbers. So some of this is only going to be down to the zip code level. Some of it's going to go on up to that city or county level. So it just kind of depends on the metric. And then some charts that go along with that. And then you can see there's even some additional breakdowns over to the right-hand side that will give you, the different cities in this area of the state. And then finally is quality of life. Here in this neighborhood report, the quality of life information is going to give you like days of full sun per year and what's the brownfield site situation in this area of town. So it also gives me commute time, monthly temperature, walkability. This neighborhood report I think is really helpful for a couple of different reasons. One is I would print and take to any open houses one copy of this neighborhood report, have it available for people to browse through as they come in and they're kind of getting the lay of the property. It gives you something to talk about with them as you're hosting an open house. And then if they ask, hey, can I take this with me? Say, you know what, it's a lengthy report, so I only printed one, but I'd be happy to email it to you. Just give me your email address and I'll push that over to you. So it gives them valuable information, gets you their contact information that you can verify, and provides them with something to talk about as they're walking around or leaving that property. The other thing that I think this is incredibly helpful for outside of your buyer packets is if you're working with anybody relocating in from another part of the state, but certainly from another state, if they're relocating to this area, I can provide them with this neighborhood report to kind of give them a lay of the land. So really good, interesting stuff here. All right, so I'm just going to use my back button. There's probably an easier way, but I'm just going to use my back button to get back to where I was last. Okay, now I'm back on the summary page for that property. So the next tab I'm going to stay in order now. So the next tab I'm going to go to is history. The history report is going to show me not just listing information, but other financial history associated with this property. So you can see here there was some sort of financing activity. It was a new loan on that property, so it must have sold maybe in 2015. Somebody took out a new loan. You can see some of this information is when it was last on the market, or at least had been on the market, and then the little orange house is the last sale recorded either in the BLC or in the public record. So it's just going to show these sales records. These little green dots are assessment history. So when did the county assessor go out to that property and make a valuation? And if that valuation changed the assessment on that property, it has the little square outline there. So that's what those little things, and of course there's a legend up here that would walk you through that, those different icons as well. A place for notes here, prior sales transactions from the public records. So I could just look at listing records, but it's going to default to public records, so I can see absolutely everything. Sometimes there's a transfer between maybe between spouses if there was a divorce situation, perhaps another family member, or a for sale by owner may have happened. So it gives me every transfer, not just sales from the listing service. Okay, assessment information, mortgage information, and at the bottom here, it would show me a distressed information if there were any pre-foreclosures, foreclosures, sheriff sales, anything that would be that distressed transfer information would show up down here. This one does not have any on it, so it's just blank information. All right, now let's go on back up to the top. The next tab over is charts. So I'm going to go to charts next. Charts is really a compilation of all of the different charts that we have been seeing sprinkled through so far. So I have really two different columns. I have this one on the left-hand side, and then these bar graphs over on the right-hand side. So this left-hand side is comparing this zip code, right? So it says this zip code compares. And then as I get down a little bit further, it says, okay, how about listing information, listing inventory, distressed properties. So all of that top section is looking at this zip code as a whole. Same with over here on the right-hand side in the top, it's comparing this zip code, but in here it's comparing the zip code to the county and then to the state on all of these different metrics. Okay, once I get down a little further on the screen, you see where my graphs change colors. I have the blue and the gold, Pacers colors, right? So if I'm looking at the blue and the gold graphs, it's actually comparing this house to my comps. What comps? Well, the comps that went in behind the scenes for my RVM, for that Realtors valuation model. So it's tying it back to that estimated value and pulling in information regarding this property versus the comps that it's run behind the scenes. So just be aware when those graph colors change, you're looking at a different set of data that it's giving you information about. Okay, are you guys good so far? If you have any questions on these first 4 tabs I've covered, now's the time to ask those if you want me to go back and look at anything else before we get into some of the manipulation that we can do regarding this subject property. You guys feeling good? Okay, so don't see anything coming in, so I'm gonna go ahead and move on. If you guys are this quiet the whole time, you cannot get HOA information as far as the covenants and restrictions through RPR. We have actually been asked to see if we can find a source at MyBor, if we can find a source that would provide us that information. And I know some of your title companies that you work with have systems that they can provide to you. So one I know for sure, because I've talked with them, is First American Title has a way that they can share that information with you. They have a little app. So we're seeing if there's something that we can do on the MyBor level, but but RPR doesn't have access to a national database that would provide those HOA documents. So it's something that our technology committee is actually looking at this year. That's something that's very, very important. So yeah, your go-to, somebody said my go-to is Chicago Title. So the title companies kind of have all of that information. We're seeing if there's a way for them to share it at an association level. Okay, but not in RPR. How will the mortgage historical data help? Here's how it may help. The mortgage historical data might help if you see that there's a little dollar sign, it would say maybe a $40,000 home equity line of credit was taken out, right? You can see a $40,000 HELOC. That may inform you that these homeowners maybe have been doing some upgrades to the property that's going to bring it in line with more of your ready to market. So that's one way that may help. Or if they have a very new mortgage that maybe is going to be right at about the same level that you think is going to be market value, you may have to be prepared to talk to them about going into a sale upside down where they may have to bring cash to closing. So having that mortgage history information can be very informative if you have those sorts of situations. It's mostly just to make sure you're informed of anything that may raise a red flag for you like that. I used a house that was on Matrix. Can you use a house that's not on the BLC? Absolutely. I just was showing you that you can get to the information in RPR either way. But if your property that you need is not in the BLC, just go in here to the main home screen in RPR. Go to this all properties menu and look up the address or the owner's names. You can also do owner's names, but I think address is probably going to be better for you to be able to then draw that property. It's just going to have public record information though. It's obviously not going to have any listing information to inform it, but RPR doesn't really use listing information if it's too far in the past anyway. It's going to kind of start fresh, but it's just pulling in all those various different pieces for reference. Okay, well, I was going to say, if you guys don't ask me any questions, we might be done early today, but that one's out the door now. You're stuck with me. Okay, so back over here, once we're kind of through those few tabs that give you information about the property, here's what I want to make sure that you understand is you don't have to click through each of these tabs. I'm walking you through it so that you're aware of what is here and how how it can be helpful to you. But if I'm on this summary page and I go, yeah, looks like good comps to me, that valuation is right about where I would land in many of my other systems that I use. At this point, I could be done. And I know I've talked for, gosh, almost an hour through all of these different pieces, but truly, if you are pulling this information up, you can pop through here pretty quickly, look through the information. It may take you 5-10 minutes, and you say, yeah, this looks good to me. I'm happy with where things stand. I'm gonna go create a report right now and move on. And I have a listing presentation ready to go that I really didn't have to slave over, like my friend that was in another system for 6 hours trying to figure out how all of this works. And coming up with a number that's so closely aligned with what she was able to find. What I have found working with you guys as realtors for a very long time though is if something's too easy like that, half of you just feel horribly guilty. Like you didn't put in enough work to really justify what your pitch is going to be. So I am going to walk you through the rest of the process just to get you comfortable with the other tools that are available to you. And then, of course, sometimes you're going to pull this up and go, that's way off. I need to get my hands in here and really refine what it is I'm looking at. So to refine what it is you're looking at, I'm going to go to the Refined Value tab at the top. This Refined Value tab actually has some of my favorite tools available to you in any of the systems that we support. Okay, so if you tuned out, you want to tune back in for this because this is some good stuff here. The top section is an abbreviated repeat of what we saw on that summary screen over here, where I had, let me just scroll down to it, where I had the public facts and my changes here. If I had made any changes, they would carry over, but this refined value, the top section is just an abbreviated version of that. So you can see lot size where I changed from 0.39 to 0.42, it carried over here. All right, if I had made any changes to bedroom, it would carry over here. But it can also tell you that there was no change to the valuation of this property based on my slight adjustment of the lot size. It's just, I'm making sure the information is as accurate as it can be when I put it on paper. So you'll see up here in the top right corner, this refined value that has the original estimate that it gave me, any changes, and then this calculation is going to be running as I walk through the rest of this page. So the next section down, this refine the value based on any home improvements, is a really, really great tool for you guys. So I'm just putting my mouse over the little I information bubble because this tells me that this is going to look at a source called Hanley Wood. Okay, so down here in the help text, it tells me this comes from a Hanley Wood, which is a source for housing development market data. So what Hanley Wood does is it pulls in information about material costs and labor costs per region for very common home improvements that are made to properties, and it pulls in all of those numbers as a resource for you here. So here's how the tool works. When you are talking with a potential home seller, do they often give you a list of, here's all of the home improvements that we've been working on, right? And sometimes you're like, okay, well, that one's going to make a difference, but this one is really just aesthetic, so it's not really going to add value. But sometimes coming up with the actual value added for some of those home improvement projects is really difficult for us if you don't have a really good source. So that's really what this tool does, is it gives me a drop-down menu that says, okay, these clients have done, well, let's say it's spring. They did a deck edition, and it was a composite, but it really was just a mid-range deck edition. I haven't done one of these before, so this is going to be fun. So when I choose one of these home improvements, it's going to give me a description of what it's talking about. So this is saying they added a roughly 16 by 20 foot deck using pressure treated joists supported by 4x4 posts anchored to concrete piers with composite decking material as the finish, okay? So the other important thing here is, when did they do this upgrade? I'm gonna say they have been working on it this spring, so they just finished it March of 2020, right? Because the newer the improvement, the higher the value is going to be. It's brand spanking new. All right, and so how much did they spend on that deck? I have no idea what a deck costs. Anybody want to chime in and tell me? Nobody wants to estimate how much a deck costs. Somebody 10,000. So my assistant over here says $10,000. I'll use this number. So I'm going to type in $10,000. Oh, somebody said 12,000, I think. So somebody said this deck cost them $12,000. They all think you're out of your mind. It didn't cost that much. So I'll back it down. How about 5,000? Make you feel, 50,000. Make you feel better, 5,000? Okay. So this is a very nice deck. When I click add, then it's going to add value, but it's not going to be that full amount. They spent $5,000 putting the deck on their house. They paid somebody to do it, by the way. They didn't just do it themselves. So that's why it was $5,000. So it's going to add value, but it's not going to be that entire value. So this calculates what I call that return on investment, right? So it's just, it's adding the value, but not that entire cost to create that feature. So that's often the heartache that you have to have a conversation with your clients about, is just because they just recently spent money doesn't mean they're going to recoup that entire amount of money. Okay. So if you don't, this is another place, if you don't like the math that it created, you could hit restore original and it'll pull that back out, and maybe you account for it some other way, maybe when we go into adjustments. Okay. So you can add as many of those as you would like to. There's all kinds of really, again, commonly used home improvements listed through here. So garage door replacements, kitchen remodels, master suites, roofing, siding, all of those different things are in here. And then at the very, very bottom, there's an option for other. So other, if I chose other, then when I put the date and the total cost in there, it's going to basically amortize that and give me a return on investment based on a time change. So that's how those different tools work, and it'll just compile and continue compiling until you're done with that. So it's one of my favorite tools in here. The next one down is refining the value based on needed improvements, right? So while they were putting on their deck, they noticed that they have some problems with their roof. Okay, now this one, I'm just going to type in the needed improvement, and then we're going to put a total cost for that repair or replacement. You know, what's their ballpark, or have they had an estimate done? This, I'm just going to guess, is going to cost them around $3,000 for this repair replacement, you know, issue that they see. Now the difference is how this tool works. When I click on add for a needed improvement, it is actually going to deduct that entire amount, because that is a repair that's needed and no one has yet paid for. Up here, they paid for that improvement that they made, but they haven't paid for this improvement that needs to be made. So basically they're accounting for it in the value of that property. So this is where you can have a conversation, say, we're going to take a hit on value because the roof has some damage to it and it's going to come up. So do you want to go ahead and make that repair, or do you want to just kind of discount the price accounting for that repair, or leave it alone and negotiate it out on the purchase agreement that you're sure is going to come any moment, right? So you kind of have a choice of how to use that little tool. Again, if you decide you don't want to include it in there, restore original will pull it right back out. But let me show you up here at the top, what it's doing is it accounted for that return on investment for the deck, and then it subtracted the $3,000 for the roof, and is landing me with that total as I go through. See how that works? Okay. So the last section here is refining the value based on market and home condition. Condition is one of those pieces of adjustments that's incredibly hard for us to figure out. And it's sort of a ballpark, I'm just going to kind of make it up adjustment when we do adjust for it. Or maybe, you know, I have my price range that came up from my comparative sales, and I'm going to skew up or down in that range based on the condition of the property. So this just gives you a tool. This is also based on that Hanley Wood source, but it's going to give you a tool to determine, you know, how does this property compare to the comps pulled in the background, or to, you can think of it, to the neighbors in the neighborhood. I tend to leave this local market conditions alone. We've been operating in kind of a hot market. What are the value different ranges? Mid-range. I don't know what that means. I'll come back to that. Okay. So let me talk through this. I tend to leave the local market conditions alone, because when you compare kind of one county to the other in our coverage area, the behavior is very, very similar. The numbers might be different, you know, in Boone County versus Hamilton County, or Brown County versus Hendricks County, but the ups and downs tend to be very, very stable across our entire coverage area. So I tend to leave that local market conditions alone unless you have a really good reason for saying, you know, this property sits in a very hot market that's different from other markets around it. But underneath that, you have the home exterior condition, interior condition, lot size, view, and privacy. So this is where you can kind of support your knowledge of the marketplace by using these little slider bars to indicate, okay, on this home exterior, I'm going to leave it mid-center because we accounted for the deck and we accounted for the roof problems. Otherwise, the outside of the property, aside from those two things, is pretty average compared to the comps or compared to the neighbors. So I'm going to leave it the same. The interior condition, you know, before they made their foray outside to do the deck repair, the deck addition, they had really concentrated a lot of effort on the inside. So the inside is a bit nicer, maybe 2 ticks nicer than the surrounding comps or the surrounding neighborhood. They've done a lot of upgrades and just got it in really good saleable condition. So you can see down here in my lower right that it's adding value based on that little slider bar. Okay, and this is going to be a percentage of the overall market value in this area. So lot size, let's say it's a little bit of a smaller lot. So I'm going to pull that down a little. And the view is really very good, especially now that they have that deck. The view is really good. And then privacy is right about equal. So I can use these little slider bars to kind of help me dial in that valuation. And now you can see up here at the top that I've increased the value by using those little slider bars, and probably a bit too much. So I'm going to pull this one back down a bit. I don't want to skew my numbers too far off. There we go. So I've increased the value now just based on those slider bars, some of the home improvements that they've given me, and I can see the whole way through. It's very transparent about what's going in, what's going out, and what I'm finding in my math. Okay, looks like you guys are asking a few more questions. Let me make sure I get those before I move on too much. Yep, I think I got everybody. Okay, good. Okay. Alrighty. So that's the refined value section. Now, again, if I've done everything I need to do and I'm happy with what I see on this page, I did a little bit of manipulation based on what I know about this property from either touring it or from what the sellers told me, and I've dialed it in really good. I'm done. Then I could go to create a report and make up my report for that listing presentation or whatever it is I'm doing. The next tab over there is the comp analysis piece that we're going to walk through just real quickly. It's a very, very straightforward tool in here, so you probably don't even need me to walk you through it, but I'm going to anyway. But the comp analysis is where you can dive in and say, okay, I don't like the comps that it chose on that first page, so I want to pick my own. I want to create my own book of comps. And this is the tool that allows you to do that. So at the very top, it shows you exactly where to start. If you ever get lost in RPR, you can't figure out where to go, just look for a blue button or a blue link. That's really how it navigates you through the system. So you can see create a report up here is always in that blue button until I hover over it and it turns black. But right here, it tells me exactly where to start. Create a market analysis. Which one do I want? Well, the comparative market analysis, which is the first one that's defaulted, is really the one that's built for realtors. It's going to be your sort of more simplified version. The sales comparison analysis was really built for appraisers, and it's going to have a lot more parts and pieces to it, kind of similar to a lot of the other CMA tools that you use, where you've got to find the values and plug in into the adjustment section. So I'm going to show you the comparative analysis because I think this is the one you guys are going to want to use. Now, once I've selected that, then I can go to the number 1 here, confirm home facts. I'm going to click the blue button. All right, so this is the 3rd time that we've seen the ability to change any home facts, and it highlights in blue the one that I had changed earlier, brought it over for me. I'm okay with everything else, and I'm going to confirm facts and close. Okay, so then it takes me and opens up the next step here, find comps. So I'm going to click on find comps, and I have really a couple of different options for how to find my comps. One of my favorites is right up here at the top where it says add a known property. So why I like add a known property, one is you guys are really good at searching in Matrix and finding exactly what you want because you're in there all the time. So if you've already done a search or you've done some poking around, maybe you've dropped some properties in a cart to use as your comps. Or maybe you just did a search and you say, okay, here's the 5 properties that I want to use as my comps. Just grab those MLS numbers, those BLC numbers, and type them in here. And that way you can use kind of your bread and butter, what you use all the time, grab those listing numbers, type them in here, and then you don't have to worry about the search portion within RPR. You've already found them, okay? The other reason I like this add a known property is I might want to go ahead and search, and I'll show you how to do that, but maybe I know about a property that I'd like to use as a comp, but it's not going to come up in my normal search results. So there's a couple of reasons why I might want to use a property that's not going to come up with my search results. Maybe it sold a bit further back in time than what I normally use. I remember working with a client one time. She's like, oh yeah, there was a house, just across the street and down a couple of doors that sold a year ago. And my house is way nicer than hers, but it's a good comp. It's almost the same floor plan. Our houses were built by the same builder, whatever it might have been. I know about that property, but I normally wouldn't go back an entire year to pull comps. I usually only go back 6 months. So since I know about that property, I want to pull it into my comps. I could type in the address or I could put in the listing ID. Okay, so that's one way that you can add comps. And you can use these together, so you don't have to pick one or the other. You can use both of them. So the other way is to search for comps based on criteria. Now, the criteria, you can see over here on my left-hand side of the screen, my criteria in RPR is different. It's much more limited than the criteria that I'm used to seeing in my searches in the BLC. So just be aware of that. It's not good or bad or otherwise. It's just not as many fields. They don't have all the same fields that we have in the BLC. But you'll see some things are defaulted automatically for you. It's looking for single family because that's the type of property I'm working on. Active, pending, and sold. For the solds down here in the date, it's going to pull anything that has sold within the last 6 months. If I wanted to add any more, I could search by using the public record. If I want to include public record transactions, maybe I know that this is let's see, what's a good example? There's a lot of new construction in this area, and I want to make sure that I pull in any builder sales that might not have been in the BLC. Those would still show up under public record. So that's a better example than for sale by owners, right? So I could include those if I wanted to. I could include other type of under contract or expired. Any of those you can go ahead and pull in. All right. The other way that I can search for specific features related to a property is using this keyword search. I can have up to 6 keywords, but let's say this property has a 3-car garage and I want to search for other comps that have a 3-car garage. I could type in here 3, I'll just put garage, and it's going to look for any fields that contain the words 3 and garage. So if I add, then it's going to pull that keyword into my search. So it's a bit more flexible than trying to find a specific field in the BLC to be able to search for features. I'm actually going to pull that back out because I think it is going to break my search. Okay, and then the property details fill in here at the bottom, and it does fill in some of these fairly broadly, but based on the subject property that I'm working on. So this says a minimum of two bedrooms. I'm actually going to change that. I want to search for exactly 4 bedrooms. So I can just do a 4 to 4, and that would be exactly 4. Okay. Bathrooms, it's going to search for 3 or more, and I'm just going to leave that open. Actually, I'm going to pull this down to 2 or more. And then living area size, this is our main and upper. So this is going to search for 2,300 square feet to 3,900 square feet. That's a pretty broad range. I'm going to leave it. I'm okay with that, but you can certainly change this if you wanted to narrow that square footage down. And then you'll see there's a few fields here that are not used. They're just not checked. But if I wanted to include year built, it's filled in for me based on the age of this subject property. So year built is, year 2000 to 2010. I can use it if I want to, but if I don't want to use it, then I just uncheck it. So it's entirely up to you. I'll go ahead and leave it checked. So once I'm done putting my criteria in, I'm going to pay attention over here to the map. Now, if I do nothing to the map, then what it's going to do is search within the viewable area that my map is set to. In this case, that might be a bit too far, or maybe I want to move my map over here so it's looking more in this area of town. So I can simply move my map, or at the top of my map, I've got a couple of buttons that can be very useful. The first one here is to draw a shape. So you're used to drawing shapes on your map in Matrix, I'm sure. So this is the same concept. I could draw a box, a radius, or a polygon, okay? Or one of my favorites is over here where it says use geography. This gives me the ability to say, okay, only search within this zip code, or search within this minor neighborhood. Minor neighborhood would be like the subdivision name. Or if I chose micro neighborhood, it would be within that phase of this subdivision. So that's the difference between those neighborhoods. And again, your results may differ depending on the area that you're in and how many of those layers are available in this data set. The bottom, though, the bottom 4 can be really, really helpful. Search within the school district or within the particular school boundary that I'm in. So that's kind of neat. So let's see what this school attendance zone is for K through 5. This is a very oddly drawn shape, but that's the school district for that elementary school. So if I only want comps from within that elementary school boundary, this makes it very, very easy to be able to do that. Okay, I don't know what I'm going to get here, but we'll run this search anyway. Now, one thing just to be aware of, the reason that I always do the left-hand side of criteria before I do the map is as soon as I do anything on the map, the next time I click, it's going to say, do you want to search in this area? So it's constantly going to prompt me to search if I touch the map. So it gets irritating to me if I'm going back and forth, so I always try to finish up on the left-hand side and then go over to the map. You guys good? I'm going to go ahead and click search and run this search here. There we go. Oh, I found quite a few. If I didn't, let's say my search didn't return very many results, or I don't think that it's as relevant as maybe I had hoped, I've got the button over here on the left-hand side. Remember the blue buttons. So I can go over here to the left-hand side, modify the search, and it'll open everything back up. When I'm ready, search this area, and it'll run that search again. So very, very easy to go back and forth between my search and my results, but it's all on the same page. So all I need to do is scroll on down to see all those search results. Now, this is going to order these properties, I think by proximity. Yeah. So this is going to order them in the sold properties section by how near they are to that subject property. So it's going to start with the next door neighbor, looks like. And this little green tag that says recently sold means that it's sold in the last 3 months. Okay. The gray sold means it's sold in the 3 to 6 month period. And then as I scroll down after all of those on market or off market properties, here are the on market properties. So I've got a pending, a for sale. If it's red like this, it means that there's a distressed marking on this property. So probably a pre-foreclosure or foreclosure on this property is what I would guess. There's a for sale property. So it tells you, but it's also got these different little colors for you to reference. Now, you'll also see like this one has a blue star next to it. And that just simply means that this is a property that was used in the RVM that it displayed on the home screen. So it doesn't mean that I have to use it or that I shouldn't use it. It just is that transparent little tag on there that lets me know this is one that it thought was similar enough that it used as a comp. So I'm going to go ahead and select that one just so I make sure and use it. Here's another one that it had selected. But again, the reason I'm doing my own comps is probably because I didn't like the ones it chose in the first place. So one thing I do want to mention down here, let me grab this one again. Notice that, that this list price here is $269. And so it's giving me this range just based on that, that price and the price per square footage. Okay. Now, here's where, just like in all of your various comp analyses that you do, whichever program that you use, this is where you're going to spend quite a bit of time that we're not going to spend for the purposes of this class going through. And that would be really looking in depth at each of these properties and determining which ones I want to use as comps. Which of these am I going to include as kind of the best from my search results? So to do that, you can just click on the address of each of these properties to pull it open in a new tab. See how it generated over here in a new tab. So I haven't lost anything that I'm doing. It's just going to pop it open in a new tab here, and it gives me all the same information that I had on my subject property. But this is a recently sold property. So this is a good place for me to show you the difference in the display and the behavior for a more recent record from what we were looking at as a couple-year-old sale. So this has the BLC pictures that it's cycling through here. You'll also see this was the sold price compared to the RVM that's posted for today for this property. So it's generating these RVMs on every single property all the time. But on this one, since it's recently sold, it's also going to show you the sold price. So you can kind of compare, okay, this one sold for right at fair market value. There was nothing out of the ordinary, it looks like, in this sale. So this is probably a good comp for me to use. I'm just going to close that, and I'll put a check next to the box here. And you saw that just dropped it into my comps bucket. Okay, and I would do that for each and every one of these as I go through. So I'm going to go down through here and just pick a few based on really just pictures and pricing. If you want to know the honest truth, it's based on pictures and pricing. So I don't want to skew my numbers too badly since I feel pretty comfortable with where it had been. So I'm going to grab a few of these sold properties, and you can see now it's generating a valuation based on the price range of the comps that I chose. Okay. Once I'm happy with the comps that I chose, and you will spend more time and you will go in depth and look at all of the details. But once I'm happy, then I'm going to find one of these blue buttons that says update valuation and close. And that will take me back into the menu to my next step in the process. Okay, so here's my comps. It's a bit lower than what it generated for me automatically. But then my next step down is adjustments. Okay, so this is where I usually have to break everybody's hearts in the matrix CMA class because I don't have numbers to hand to you. But the nice thing with the way that RPR does the adjustments is you do not have to generate the values for the features that you need to adjust on. So a general rule of thumb when pulling your comps and relating them to adjustments is the more similar comps that you can pull, the fewer adjustments that you will need to do, which makes sense. That's nothing new. But if you can get very, very good at pulling similar comps, and I know it's not always possible, but the better job that you can do, the fewer adjustments that you need to make. So I would, in real life, I would be very careful to make sure, if my property has a basement, I want to pull other comps that have a basement. If it doesn't, then I don't want those. If mine has a 3-car garage, I'm going to try to find other properties with a 3-car garage. If it has 2, I want 2. So I try to get them as similar as possible within reason for what's available in the marketplace. But at minimum, I want at least 3 sold records. And the value of comps that you do pull is their value is better as a comparative. The more recent the sale and the more similar the property. So that's really the heart behind the matter. And then when I get into this section in RPR, if I roll down the screen here, you can see that there's really none of those boxes feature by feature for me to make adjustments on. So that's one of the other reasons in RPR in particular, I want to try to get as similar as possible. So because of the way that it makes the adjustments, it becomes even more critical. So at the top, before I even get into the adjustments piece, there's 2 things I do that just helps me from a process standpoint. The very first thing I do is click on one of these links here that says make the photos bigger, please, because they're very tiny and hard to see on screen. So it's just going to expand that information and make it easier for me to see. Now, the next thing I do is I always like to order my comps with the most similar comp kind of as my number 1, and then going from there. So I might look down through this information and pick out the most similar comp. And I'm just going to pretend, I'm going to go to the next page here, and I'm going to pretend that this, let's see, no, I don't like any of those. I'm going to pretend that this one right here is my most similar comp. So I want it in the first position. So I can just change it from here where it said second, I can change it to first, and I can order my comps in the order that I'd like to present them, or I'd like to talk about them when I'm talking with the client or when I'm looking through the information. This is the one I want first. This is the one I want second. And let's say this one here is the one that I want third. Okay, so it's easy to move them around, change them around, and then I can go previous or next if I have more than one page of comp records. Okay, so bigger photos and put them in order. That's always where I start the process off. And then I can start really diving into what are the differences between these properties. Okay, do any of these have more acreage? Nope, all of these have a much smaller lot than my property. So I'm going to come up here and say, overall, in general, looking down through the information, and I'm taking all of it into account. What are the differences? What are those value differences between this property and my subject? And then I'm going to use this little rating scale, similar to our refined value, similar to the refined value, where I'm going to rate this. Is this better than my subject property or worse than my subject property? And by how much? So if this is just a little bit worse than my subject property, I'm going to slide it down 1 tick mark. Just 1 little slider tick mark. So this says this is going to adjust your subject up because this property is worse, right? This property is inferior to my subject. So it's going to adjust my subject property up in value. All right, same with this one. This is just a little bit worse because all things, all other being equal, my property sits on a better lot, a bigger lot. It's the corner lot, so it's just a better situation. So it's going to continue adjusting my property. Now, this one, I can see just from the valuation that it's probably an inferior property, but I can even still scroll through the pictures here. So in addition to looking at the data down below, I can still scroll through the pictures and even do a comparison. Maybe I look at this one and say, okay, well, that's what the dining room looks like in this property. What does the dining room look like in this house over here? So I can scroll through those pictures and put them wherever it makes sense, depending on what it is I'm comparing and trying to figure out the difference between these different properties. So I'm going to say this one is actually a much worse comp than what my subject is, and so it's going to continue driving that valuation. I'll go to the next grouping of them and just go through the same process. So this one's a bit worse, this one's just a little bit. Okay, so I have the best property on the block. All right, I'm going to go back over to my previous grouping of comps and then look down through these and see what did that do. Right? What did that do to my value? So based on this, now I've driven my value of my property right back up pretty much where I had it in the low 370s. So based on that, I might adjust these a little bit more. Maybe I was a little too aggressive on that one. And maybe I was a little bit too aggressive on this one. I don't want to skew my numbers too much. So that lands me, again, right back in the general ballpark of where I had been before. Now, one thing I would recommend if you're going to use these slider bars and make any adjustments, since there is no inline note, there's no inline note to tell it that I adjusted it based on, garage and lot size and these different things, I'm going to add notes at the bottom of the screen. There's a notes section that tells me overall, in general, here are the differences that made me account for differences in value up here in the slider bars. Let them know why you made those decisions. It also helps remind you as you're going through the information why you made those choices to change value. So I might just say, lot size and what else? Total rooms difference. Okay, so I can list them all out one by one, or I can write a paragraph. If you're more of a, I'm going to tell the story about why this property is not as good a comp as what your subject is, you can write a story down there too. It just really depends on your personality. I'm a technical writer, so I write instructions all the time. I think in bullet points. So that's how I'm going to write my notes in here, but that might not be you. Maybe you're more of a storyteller. Okay, so there was a question came in. How do you find the map? If it was in the searching comps piece, the map was actually, if you just rolled back up in the screen, then it was there, but I'll show you because we're going to move off of this screen again. I can get back to the map if you still need to. And then the last question was, do you give value for the subject having more bedrooms? So yeah, that is a factor that I would factor in. This one has 3 bedrooms and all of these other have 4 bedrooms. So maybe that, kind of equals out based on the other things. So yes, definitely I would, add value for that, but you're going to kind of have to do a balancing act here. How are these differences weighted? A bedroom probably carries more weight than minor differences in lot size. But since I have a major difference in lot size, maybe that offsets almost as much as an additional bedroom. So you kind of have to do the little rating scale thing, and you could do it as you go through and say, well, this has one additional bedroom, so it's better in that respect. Oh, but the acreage is far less, is almost half here, so that's going to go back down a tick mark. And what else might I adjust on? Oh, it has more rooms, so maybe it's up another tick mark because it has more rooms. So you can kind of do that one by one as you go through if you want to, or you can think of it as an overall, in general, this one's better, worse, and then by how much. Okay, so once I'm happy and I've made all of my little slider bar adjustments and I've made all of my notes, then I'm going to go down to the bottom, find my blue button, and click Update Valuation and Close. Okay, and then the last piece, look, I'm almost exactly right where I started, but the very last piece of this would be create a report if I was done. But somebody asked me about the map, so to get back into any of these sections, maybe like the search, I would just click Edit here. And that takes me back into the map, back into my search. I could modify it from here if I wanted to. So just because I've completed one of these steps does not mean that I can't get back into it. So if I needed to change anything, change the comps that I've chosen, I can do that. And then again, just update valuation and close, and it would account for all of those. And I can still get into each of these portions with the little edit link to the right of them. Okay, but I'm going to go down to the very bottom. There is a link that says clear all and start over. If you ever get yourself just tangled up and you're like, I messed that up big time, I just want to clear this entire CMA piece out, this comp analysis piece out, and either ditch it or start over. This clear all and start over would just clear out this portion, just the comp analysis. It wouldn't take out any other refinements. It wouldn't take out any of the other changes that I've made. But if I messed up and I picked bad comps and I messed my valuation up, I can always clear. But I'm going to go down here to create a report. You can either use this create a report or this one. The only difference I'll show you here, if I click on create a report down here, it recognizes that I just completed the CMA function, and so it lands me automatically on seller's report. If I were to click the create a report button that was up here, it's always going to land me on the top option, which is property report. And then you can pick whichever one you want from the menu. But this one, since I clicked at the bottom of the CMA function, it just assumes that I'm doing a CMA for a seller and lands me on the seller's report. So let me just show you what each of these are. Property report is going to be more of your buyer style report. That, you can use it for a lot of different functions, but it's built more to present to buyers. Seller's report is going to be more like a listing presentation style report. Property flyer is going to be just a one-pager. I'll show you one of these as well. Mini property report might help you out if you just want a very small sector of information. This is going to include things like the neighborhood housing stats and some of the extended home facts, but it's not going to be a full-fledged listing presentation. There's going to be lots and lots of pages. The valuation workbook would only be available if I had gone through that appraiser style comp analysis. So I don't even have access to the valuation report from here. Market activity, neighborhood, and school reports are all specific to those sections and those styles of searching. So, so really, if I do a CMA or I walk through this entire process, property report, seller's report, property flyer, and mini property report are the only reports that I can create. Now, these reports, though, are very extensive. So if I go up here to seller's report and click on hide details, more details, it brings through all of the pages that are going to be included in this report. It calls them report elements, but it's really the different sections of the report that is going to be included in this packet. So it starts out by default with absolutely everything selected. And if I were to have you go ahead and create one of those, your reports are going to be about 80-ish pages long, which is probably overkill. Usually in class, people go, "Oh my gosh, that's a lot of stuff. I don't want quite that much." So I have on my screen just some recommendations based off agents I know that are using this frequently, and kind of my favorite reports. So I've pulled out and modified some of these reports. You can do the same if you want to, or you can kind of experiment and see what you like best. For the defaults, I have taken out the homeowner facts out of this section. So the homeowner facts are, their name, address, all of that stuff. So, so I've taken out the homeowner facts because likely I'm sitting next to the homeowner, so it's just a little bit big brother. Same thing with the sales and financing activity. That's that chart. Remember the chart that had the little house icon and the little $ icon that showed any financing activity. So I've taken that out as well because sometimes it can be uncomfortable kind of sitting shoulder to shoulder and having that appear on the screen just feels a little intrusive sometimes. A couple others that I have pulled out are actually in this market activity section. This is a section that can really get overloaded with information if you include absolutely everything. So in our market, I've pulled out some of the information that's not as relevant. So I've definitely taken out expired listings and distressed properties. I just don't have those included. You might find it odd that I also took out this recently sold market activity, but I only take that out if I've gone through that comp section and chosen my own comps to show as recent solds. I find that if I pick my own comps and I leave in this recently sold section, it can get a little confusing to the client as they're looking through the information. So it'll make more sense once I produce this report and you see what it looks like. But those are some that I've pulled out. And then the very last one is about RPR and our data. And I've pulled that one out. It's just a kind of a disclosure page. So it's not necessary. Nobody really wants to read it. So I've pulled it out. There is, second from the bottom, there's a seller's proceeds sheet. I think I may have mentioned that it was there, but it's not my favorite seller's proceeds. But you can use it if you find it helpful. So I'll leave it in so you can see what it looks like. But I tend not to use this seller's proceeds because I think you have better seller proceeds tools. Even the one in Matrix is better, I think, than this one because it at least gives you a few different options. Okay. Now, the really important part to this report setup page is these right here underneath the dotted lines where it says subject property photos. This is someplace that can really load up the number of pages. And remember, if I'm doing a CMA, then my subject property photos are from the last time that this property was listed with the previous owner's stuff in the photos. So it's not even my current homeowner that I'm working with. So I chose main photos only for that reason. Okay. Certainly, if you're going to do a buyer CMA on a property that's currently listed and maybe you're trying to figure out what to offer on that, so you go through the CMA process for a buyer on an active listing, then include all the photos for sure. But on my normal like seller CMA, I'm doing main photos only. The market activity sections, I highly recommend that you choose just 4 properties. That's going to be 1 page for each of these market activity sections. Again, it'll make more sense as I produce this. And then include side by side. I use only side by side. Again, it's gonna give them good information, but not overload it with tons and tons of pages of properties that have sold or are on the market. This is where I mentioned that if you put notes in along the way as you're going, you can either include your notes or choose to exclude your notes. It's up to you. But there's just a little check mark here. Do I want those included in my report or not? And if I'm using the seller's proceed and I put any entries in there, then I would want to include those. I did not for this one, so mine's just going to be blank. But I at least want to show you what it looks like. Now, these last 3 say suppress. So that's if there's anything that you think is going to be in your report that might be confusing or too much information to provide to the client. So if the estimated value for this subject property was way off, I'm fortunate today that it's pretty dead on, but if it was way off, you could suppress that from your report so it doesn't show up on the page. Same with the estimated value for your comps. If any of those looked way off, just suppress those, and that way it doesn't show up. And then this last piece is the refined value for your subject property. That's where we put in their deck addition and the need for roof repair, and then we use those little slider bars. If you don't want the client to see that page, you can suppress it. So like if I put everything that the house was really ugly, I moved everything to the low slider bar and I don't want the client to see that, then I can suppress that and it won't show up in my report. Okay, and then it just asks me what data sources. So that's how I have mine set up, and I kind of go through that slowly in case you want to copy off of me for those recommendations. I'm going to skip down now to step number 3, which is personalizing the report. Now, on these, it's for someone, so I would personalize that report, and I would type in my seller's name. So this, I can't remember what the seller's name was, but I would put the seller's name in here. I'm just going to be real creative today and say seller's name. Okay, so you would put the seller's name in here, and you can type a message that would appear on the report if you want to put some message in there. It might be, I don't know, I'm coming up blank on creative ideas today, but you could just say, thanks for allowing me this opportunity to meet with you and present this market activity information. So whatever it is that you want to say, you can type a message. And then the step number 4 is the delivery method. I highly, highly recommend on these sellers reports that you always display now rather than just emailing it to someone. I guess you could email it to yourself, but rather than just emailing it, I'd highly recommend that you display now so that it pulls it up in a PDF. I can look through everything. Maybe I save it. So since it's a PDF report, maybe I save it to my computer and I'm going to either email it to them from my own email, or I'm going to, print it out, or at least print portions of it out and take it to a meeting and sit and walk my client through it, either in person or online. I'm going to walk them through it. So I would, on the seller's report in particular, I would always display those now. Okay, it's going to take a minute for it to generate that PDF because this is probably going to be, I'm going to guess, 30 pages long. So still a pretty lengthy report, but you'll see it's a nice looking report. Now, when that report is ready, you can see it queued up here. This number 1 says it's being generated. When it's ready, you're going to hear a doorbell tone come through your computer. So if anybody has dogs in your house right now, you might want to turn the sound down on your computer for a second. Of course, then you couldn't hear me. So, but just be aware that there's going to be a doorbell tone that comes through when that report is ready. And it will show up over here on my left-hand side of my report page. There you go. It'll show up there for 30 days. So I can always get back to it in my system over the next 30 days and pull it back up. So, okay, I was pretty close. This is 24 pages. Okay, and I'm just going to zoom out on this so you can see. Okay, so this is the seller's report. This is the CMA, essentially the listing presentation that I've created. And you can see it's just a really nice professional looking report. Now, if you are with one of the franchises that has branded the RPR system for your company, then you would see your company information show up automatically on this. If it doesn't, I'll show you how that you can add your picture, your logo, everything in here in the setup screen once I walk through these reports. Well, I'll make sure and show you that. So there's I told you the Google Maps photo of the property. It doesn't respond to my moving the picture around. If I took my own picture and uploaded it in here, then I could use it instead. Okay. But as I scroll on down, much of what you see on the screen is exactly what we walked through on the tabs. So I'm not going to spend time on every single one of these pages because we've already seen it on the screen. But you can see how it produces in the actual report. It's very, very similar to what we saw on screen. So there's the picture from the last time it was in the BLC. Some history, some of those charts pulling in. This is a piece I didn't mention. I didn't pull up the map today, but in the map, there's a series of heat maps that shows various different metrics that you might want to mess around with. So this is market activity in that zip code. And it's talking about estimated home values. So the darker the blue, the higher price these properties. If they're more white or pale blue, then those are the lower priced properties. And then these are some of the charts and graphs that we looked at earlier as well. All right, we saw all of these on screen. And then this is the map of the comps that I pulled in. Okay, and then there's all of the comps that I selected in that side by side. And then there's the market activity section. So this is where I had pulled some of the reports out because it shows me the comps side by side here. And then it goes right into market activity that shows all of the transactions in that area surrounding my subject property. But then it gives me a page of each of those different statuses. So here's a page of the actives, and then there's a page of the pendings. And I took out solds, distressed, and expireds because I've already covered my comps up at the top. I can show them actives and pendings, but I don't want to confuse them by overloading them with additional market activity that isn't really relevant in my story that I'm telling. Okay. So the next page here is the recommended pricing strategy that gives me all of those different metrics, all of those different numbers that I worked through, and finally came up with my landing number here of where I think that we should be priced. One of the things I like on this page, it's formatted a little funny for me today, and I don't know why. Usually this is up here and I have signature lines down below. So there might be just a setting on my computer that's a little different today. But what I like on this page is it gives me a signature line for the sellers. And it's really just an acknowledgement that I've presented this information to them. They've accepted it. It doesn't mean that we're going, that we're signing a contract or anything. It's just an acknowledgement. But there's something psychological about getting someone signing. You guys probably already know this from sales training, but there's something psychological about getting somebody to sign something that opens them up to continuing to sign documents. So if I get them to acknowledge that I've presented them with this information, then it makes pulling my list of contracts out just a little bit easier for me to then get into that process and talk about what it means to to contract with me to work on their behalf as their realtor. Okay. And then the last page in here is the seller's proceeds that I mentioned, and it's just a fill-in form. So this is a PDF fill-in that I can say, okay, if we list at 370,000 versus, oops, that was my low, 360,000. I can't type today. 360,000. There we go. Versus 370. Then here's how the numbers are going to change. So I can type in the first loan, get the commissions in there, seller concessions, anything else that I might put in there. I can type it in here while I'm sitting with them. So it's just something that I can do kind of on the fly. Okay, so that's what the seller's report looks like. And then I had somebody ask me about a buyer's report. So I definitely want to show you those as well before we kind of wrap up today. I'm going to go ahead and get an active listing from within the BLC. Oh, it almost expired. Whew. I'll just go into the market activity and grab one of these new listings. New listings are still happening. So I'm going to say that I have somebody interested in this property on Amber Way. And it's just one that I just randomly grabbed. From a scenario standpoint, let's say that I've walked, I've shown my clients this house. They're really, really interested and they want more information. If I have it up in the BLC, I can click on that little Skittles button. Remember, there's our RPR logo if I have it in the BLC, or I can go in RPR from the dashboard and look it up. I could either find it under all properties or in the for sale menu. Or option number 3 is RPR does have an app. So I could have my app downloaded on my phone and pull it up in there. You can do this process from any of those options. I'm just going to look up that property in either Matrix and hop through, or from the search menu in RPR, or I'm going to find it on the app. Once I'm in here, I can look and say, okay, here's the list price, here's the RVM. I don't really need to do anything else. I don't need to go through any of these other tabs because I'm just pulling up this active listing so I can provide information to my buyer. I'm just going to go straight up here into the top right corner, create a report. If I click on more details over here, you can see I've got every single one except the about RPR and our data. I have every single one of these pages checked because I want to provide my buyer client with as much information as possible. So I'm going to leave everything in there. I might go ahead and personalize it and put in my buyer's name. And then this one, I'm not as married to you displaying the report before you email it because you already have a contractual relationship with that buyer. So if you just want to email it to them, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and display it so you can see what it looks like on my screen. But it's a little less critical because say if you already have a relationship with that buyer, go ahead and email it to them if you want to. Mine's going to generate here. And while that's generating, I want to also go up here and show you what the property flyer looks like. So you can see that. Now, the property flyer, I pulled it on this active listing. This listing actually only has one photo on it. If it had 48 photos on it, I would see all 48 photos. But I can create a real quick and easy property flyer. If you're somebody that does the info boxes by your for sale signs, this is a great property flyer to be able to stick in those info boxes. If you're doing an open house or if you're doing some flyers for just listed or just sold, any of those applications, this is a really, really great little flyer to create. So I'm going to call this one just listed. Okay, it pulled in the property description from the BLC. So that's really all I need to do is put in a title for my property report. So I'm going to report, and while that's running, I will show you the property report. Okay, so the property report, when I generate it, this is for my buyer, is a 28-page report. It's still branded to me, has the photo of the property, and a lot of the information is going to be similar to what I just showed you in the seller's report. This is going to include all photos that are listed on that listing. So again, this only has But on most of my properties I pull up, I'm going to have much more than one listing. This is just brand new in the system today. So this would pull in all current listing photos, and then it also pulls in the historic photos. I think that's great because it gives the buyers a chance to compare. Well, what did it look like before these homeowners, and what have they done to it? What's the differences over time? So sometimes it's nice to see at a glance, oh, well, look at all the work they did to the bathroom or the kitchen or whatever it might be. Then it's going to pull in any comps that it found behind the scenes, because again, it's giving an RVM. So it would pull in any of those comps. And then a lot of that information is going to be the same. There's more heat maps. Somebody chimed in and said, you like the heat maps? So there's even more heat maps in the property report, and the flood zone map is there. But this is also going to include the neighborhood report that I went through earlier. So this is going to show me the housing and stats and charts, right? The population differences, the education groupings, population groupings, economics, quality of life, all that stuff that I went through before. This is going to include all of that in this report. I think that's really cool, because when your clients are interested in purchasing a property, they want all the information they can about that property, certainly, but a lot of times they'll ask you, how's the neighborhood? What are the schools like? They want all that information too. So this is going to pull all of that in as well, all the neighborhood report, and then lastly is the school report. So it's compiling all of that in one place. And you can email this, you can download it as a PDF and hand it to them if you want to. But if you pull it from the app, it gives you the additional option of texting it to someone. So sometimes that's nice if you're walking through the property and they ask you about it, pull it up on the app and just text them that report. Okay, and then the last thing I was going to show you is that property flyer that I pulled up. Here's my just listed flyer that I could put in the door of the neighbors' houses and say, hey, if you are, if you know anybody looking for their dream home in your neighborhood, pass this information along. This also works great if you wanted to make it a PDF and maybe post it on social media. I just listed this price, take a look at, or I just listed this property, take a look at it. Okay, so you can do all of those different things with these little flyers. All right, last thing, and then we will wrap up. I want to take you back in RPR up here to the little settings gear in the top right corner. This is where you're going to be able to personalize the information in your system so that it displays on your reports. So if you click on that little gear icon, it's going to take you to the profile settings. So you can put in your agent photo, you can put in your logo, make sure all your contact information is the way that you want it to appear on your various different reports that you run. And you can put your phone in there, you can put your email address in there. If you have an assistant, if you're somebody that has an assistant, you can allow access to another person to act on your behalf. Here it is, assistant users. So you can create an assistant if you have somebody that needs to be able to get into the RPR system and work on your behalf. Okay, so once you make any changes there, just make sure you save at the top, and then you never have to mess with that piece of it again. It's there for you. Okay, so hopefully all of that gets you started, gets you going. I will tell you, we do track usage on all of our different systems, and we have about 25% of our membership that uses RPR on a regular basis. So one of the reasons I like to mention that is because if you know that you're competing for a listing, there's a really good likelihood that if you use RPR as your listing presentation for your pitch, it's probably going to be different from what those other competing agents may be using. And I just think that the RPR system provides these really nicely done reports. As I say, it makes you look super smart without having to really develop all of this stuff on your own. It gives you a really great, grouping of information to pass along that just kind of puts your best foot forward. So my encouragement would be get in here, mess around with it, experiment with, navigating through the system. If you have any questions, of course, you can always reach out to us. We are happy to help you. That's what we're here for. So you can always reach out to our help desk. You can always reach out to me individually if you'd like to, and I'm happy to help you with anything. And then the other thing on your RPR screen at the top is you'll notice a little graduation hat icon, and that would take you to more of those webinars, those training videos that they have available, so that you can continue building on this introduction that you've made to RPR today. But if you want to delve in really deep, or there's a specific sector of the marketplace that you work with, there's probably a solution for that. I can tell you there's a whole commercial side of RPR that I don't even touch, just a little bit. There's a tool for working with investors, and how some of these different parts and pieces of RPR can help you in working with investors. So there's a lot more to this, but I like to walk you through this just because I think the reporting out of RPR is one of the most powerful tools that you have available to you. So I want to make sure that you're comfortable with that process. Okay. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and I will see you next time. Take care.